What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Acura Audio Garage. What? What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Acura Audio Garage. Today we're continuing the DIY Pro Series. We're going to be adding some amplifiers to our factory radios. This is a question we get a ton. This video is for the MDX DIY Pro Series, so this will cover 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014 MDX. Now, if you have a TL from 09 to 14 or TSX from 09 to 14, the amplifiers are the same, so this harness will be the same, and I'll tell you more about that later, but let me give you a brief overview of what we plan to accomplish in this video. Installing a 4-channel amplifier. So this is a Hyphonics 800 by 4, 800 watts. Really, it's about 100 watts RMS by 4, which is perfect for what we need. And then a mono block, which is this Kicker CXA 800.1, which is for our sub. Together, these amps, the RMS power, what we're going to use is going to be right below 1500 watts. So our amp kits, we're using a dual amp wiring kit. It's from Kicker and it supports 1500 watts of power. It is 4 gauge, but it's going to power this amp and this amp. The other stuff you see are the other essentials necessary to install these amplifiers. Now you may be thinking, why would I use a 4-channel and a mono block? This car is equipped with navigation and has a total of 10 speakers if you consider that the tweeters are separate speakers. But you have a door speaker, a tweeter, a center channel, a rear door speaker, a rear satellite speaker, these are referred to, and then of course you have your subwoofer. So it's a total of 10 drivers, but it's 8 amplified channels. For our video, what? What's wrong with our video? What? Oh, he wants me to tell you about our sponsor. Our sponsor. We don't have a sponsor. I'm just kidding. I don't know what he wants. Let me figure that out. Sorry about that. Dog, the dog needs what it needs. So back to what I was saying. We have a total of 10 speakers. We only have a 4-channel amp and a mono block. So for our case, we're going to be amplifying the 4 door speakers, which will include our tweeters, and disabling the factory sub and running our own aftermarket subwoofer. We don't have a subwoofer selected yet. I'm sure the subwoofer you pick is going to be different from the ones we pick. So just whatever subwoofer you have laying around, just make sure it's compatible with your amp. This is a 1 ohm stable subwoofer amp, so you could really use any subwoofer that you want. Your 4-channel amp, I would pick a better choice than this. The reason why this equipment is here is because it's stuff we have laying around, and this may be a bad assumption, but I'm going to assume that the stuff you use in your older Acura is going to be stuff you have laying around. If you're using new stuff, then I recommend going with an 8-channel amplifier, so that's why this is here. This is a DSP amplifier by JBL, has 8 channels of output. It only does about 40 watts into each speaker, so you could just use this as a DSP, or you could use it to amplify some of the speakers you don't really necessarily want to be that much louder, so those satellite speakers or the center speaker. Now you may be asking yourself, why do I need a DSP, or why do I need a line out converter, or why is there a line out converter here? On your MDX with navigation like this one, your factory amplifier and your factory radio talk to each other via CAN bus, and the factory radio has a fixed non-variable output, meaning when you adjust the volume, the output will not change. So we need to integrate into the amplifier, which means that we're going to plug this into our amplifier, capture the output of the amplifier, and convert that to a signal that our amplifiers can use, or manipulate that signal with our DSP. I don't know if you saw the Artisan DSP back there, the Bit Nove, so that we can better prepare that signal for our amplifiers. So a quick side note, if you have an MDX without navigation, you only have a total of 6 speakers, which include all your doors, center, and sub. You lose those satellite speakers. So with those 6 speakers, the factory amplifier may look the same, but it is a little different. You get a variable output out of the factory radio from 0 volts to about 2 volts, and we have the amp bypass available for that. So the amplifier in the MDX is in the same location regardless of year and trim. It just is different, and that location is here behind the glove box. So if you drop your glove box, that shiny thing you see back there, that silver shiny thing, I'm going to touch it with the light. This right here is the factory amplifier. Now to unplug it, you can't reach from here, but you can see it from here. You can unbolt it from here if you're going to remove it. To actually get to the amplifier connectors, you're going to need to remove this cover and reach and disconnect it. We'll cover that disassembly later on. Just want you to know that if you do have a base, installing aftermarket amplifiers is a lot easier. You get a harness here that gives you the 5 RCA outputs. So you can see they're all labeled, including the sub and center. And then you get a connection to all the speakers right here through this harness. So you don't need to do what we're about to do with the ELS or navigation equipped MDX. So because our MDX does have navigation, we're going to be working with the factory amplifier. We're going to capture the output of our factory amplifier with this harness right here that we sell. And we're going to cut the wires that we want to amplify. I'll show you that in more detail later on. I just want to let you know that we're going to capture the output, send that to our line out converter or our DSP, and then we're going to send the signal from there via RCA to our amplifiers. So talked a lot. Let me get started with the actual installation. So the first thing is we need to get to our factory amplifier. So earlier in the video I told you to get to the factory amplifier, we're going to take this cover off. This cover is held on by clips. My clips aren't in all the way, so mine came off a lot easier. What holds this on is these metal clips. So there's one right there, one right there, one right there. I'm sure you can see my metal clips are missing. When you go to pull this, the metal clips are going to want to either get stuck or fall, so make sure you collect them all. This actually had metal clips missing before we even took it off. They must have taken it off in the past, whatever. So now to get to our amplifier, you don't even have to remove this all the way, but we will clear this out later so we can run wire. But for the first things first, we need to get to our connectors, and those are right here. Specifically, the connector we need is this one. This is the connector that we needed to get out of the amp so we can work with it. Now that we got that connector out, let me show you what you're gonna do. I'm gonna show you the next step on the bench because it's gonna be easier than showing you in the car. But this is the harness you picked up from us, because if you don't pick this up, it's gonna make this job a lot more annoying. But ultimately, one side plugs into the OEM connector. The other side plugs back into your amp. And here are the wires now that you can wiretap or cut to get the signal or send new signal to. On this side, you have all the speakers. So whatever you cut here from the wires going that way, go to your speakers. The wires coming from this connector are coming out of your amp. They go to your line out converter. Now that we talked about the harness, let's talk about the other part you're gonna need. Depending on how many amps you plan to add. So if you're gonna do a full system like us, you're gonna need something like this or something like this. But if you're just doing maybe either a speaker box, also known as a chuchero, or just a subwoofer, use the kicker lock. This is the kicker key lock. This is a line out converter with some special technology built in to make sure that it works with the factory system with no issues, and also lets you know what kind of signal you're working with. So here you see power, then low, mid, high. This will let you know, hey, you have enough signal here to run subs. You have enough signal here to run your full speaker box. So gonna take a look at this real quick and I'll show you how to hook it up, and then we'll dive into our bigger line out converter. So in our case, we're using the kicker lock just for a subwoofer. So this has 2 pairs of speaker wires. We're going to be connecting the 2 pairs to our subwoofer, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So here you have a pair of whites, a pair of grays. So you would think, hey, on here I should hook this up to my whites and my grays. And I guess you could do that, but since we're using this for a sub, we want to hook it up to our subwoofer output. So we're gonna go white with black and gray with black to our negative, and white and gray to our positive. Here is the harness. On our subwoofer, we have sub positive and sub negative. Sub negative is brown with black, sub positive is brown. In this case, we're not going to be keeping our factory sub. We're going to leave it disconnected. So when I cut this, on this side is the output from the factory amplifier. That's where these wires will go. So again, my 2 to my positive, my 2 to my negative, like so. Then these I'm going to hook up power, ground, accessory, etc. So these lead to the sub amplifier, so these won't get any signal any longer. Your sub amplifier won't work. Your factory subwoofer will stop working. We're going to send the signal from here to this, and then this is going to now send RCA signal to our subwoofer amplifier to power our aftermarket sub. So my kicker key lock harness is almost connected. Like I said, subwoofer negative is this brown with black. That goes to both my wires that have the black stripe. Solid brown is positive. That goes to both my solid wires. So gray and whites go to solid brown. Then I needed to tap yellow and black. I just spliced it in. So you see black, you see yellow. Now I have these two right here. Blue is remote out. This is going to go to your amplifier. And red has to go to accessory or remote in. Accessory at the amplifier, you do have, it's pin number 28. It's in this harness right here. So I'm going to show you how to wire tap that real quick. I will warn you, this wire is very thin, so you want to be very careful. It's right on this bottom row. It's this white wire next to this purple, right here where my thumb is. In order to tap it, we're going to want to strip all this stuff back so we can get a nice clean tap up here. If you don't want to tap that wire, I totally understand. What you're going to need is a fuse tap. You need a micro fuse tap. You're going to need to tap the fuse box for one of the accessory or ACC. In this car, I believe ACC is fuse 32. Yep, so fuse 32 is the ACC fuse. That's the fuse that you would put your tap into. With your tap, your primary fuse goes in the first slot, and then the second slot gets your new fuse, and then you can run this to that side of the car, and this will turn on and off with the key because it's tapped on fuse 32, which says ACC. It's a 10 amp fuse. Here's my 28 pin connector, and 20 is this white wire right here, and you could see I have stripped it back so I could tap it. So right up there, this wire right here, my index finger, that's the wire you want to tap. I'm not a huge fan of wire tapping, so I'm actually going to just tap my fuse box. So like I said, the original fuse goes in that fuse slot. Now we need to remove fuse 32, and that's going to go in this second slot. Fuse 32, which is my ACC fuse, is up in the top right corner. So look at my fuse box like this. Top right corner, hopefully you can see that, would be this fuse. So I pull that fuse out. I then add it to my fuse tap. So I slide that in there. And now I put my fuse tap in that slot. It should go in there nice and firmly. And now this has power when the car turns on or when I turn the key. And here's where I'm going to attach my remote wire or my ignition wire to turn on whatever accessory. So if you don't want to wire tap, or it's a little tough to wire tap, especially that really thin wire, you can instead install a fuse tap on the fuse box and run that to this red wire. You're just gonna need some red wire and to snake it and stuff. But for the demonstration of this, I just wanted to show you that how to do the fuse tap. I'm going to hook up my red wire to the tap that I created over here. Harness is now ready to install in the car. This is gonna plug into the amp. This is gonna plug into the existing harness I used to plug into the amp. Into the amp, you should hear a nice click. Then the other connector is going to plug into what used to go into the amp. Just make sure it clicks into place like so. And now we plug that into there. And there we go. We're just going to do a quick test. So I'm going to take my key, put it in the ignition. When I do that, it's turning on and off with the key, which is exactly what we want. So now we have to go through the programming procedure for the key lock. I'm not going to show you that. There's multiple steps. You have to download their test tracks. If you're just using an active line-out converter for your sub, you saw how to hook it up. The rest of the installation, parts of it will pertain to you, parts of it won't. If you're doing more than subs, we're going to cover the actual LOC and DSP next. I just know this is a super common scenario. People ask all the time, how do you do this? And could you tap here? Could you tap back there? It's really up to you. I just find it's easier to install your stuff up here because you have access to the amplifier right there. So I'm playing pink noise into the key lock to make sure that the subwoofer signal here is good, and I'm about to show you key lock says it's good. So I know it's hard to hear, but as you turn the input gain up, you can see, oh, okay, yeah, you do have a good subwoofer signal. As I keep going up, it tells me, oh, you might even have a mid-range signal. But even if I max this out, I'll never have a high signal since it's a subwoofer. But we just want a sub signal, so we'll know that this key lock is picking up the right wires, and we'll have the sub output that we need for our subwoofer. So we reset our harness. We got our kicker key lock out of here. The rest that was missing from the key lock was to run your RCAs to your sub amp and then run your remote to your sub amp, and both of them right there, it's clear. Now we're gonna do our line out converter. So our line out converter we're using is the Link 6, and it's pretty small. It's not a big line out converter. Here it is. Here's our instruction manual. What's cool about this is you do get a subwoofer knob, so this will control channels 5 and 6, which are designated for your sub. It's a pretty nice little knob, so I mean, if you want subwoofer control on the fly, I really like this. It has like a step to it, so as you turn it, you feel it, but I mean, that's a plus, it's whatever, it's up to you. So let's get into wiring this thing. So open it up. All of our inputs are right here, so this is where we're going to be wiring. Here is our gains, our source select for each channel. So do we want to sum, or do we want to just copy, or do we want to use the inputs on this side? For our case, we're going to use all of the inputs, so we're going to go, this is going to be in the middle, which is channel 5 and 6, this is channel 3 and 4, and then 1 and 2 is obvious. Then we have our clip light. So now it's just a matter of hooking these up. This does have an auxiliary in for if you want to use some other source other than your radio to generate audio. So now with our harness, we already clipped our subwoofer wires. We need to clip the rest of the wires which we're going to amplify. Earlier in the video I told you we're going to do our door speakers. So we need to find front left negative and positive. We need to find front right negative and positive. So here we go, front right negative and positive. Then we want our rear door speakers. Don't get confused because this says surround RL, surround RR. Those are your satellite speakers. So in this car, they're the speakers in the C core, in the C panels. In your TSX or your TL, they're going to be the rear door speakers because your rear deck speakers are known as rear left and rear right, and your surround speakers end up being your door speakers. So now I'm going to find those other speakers I'm telling you about. So now you have this crazy looking mess, but this is exactly what you want. So this right here is the output of all of those speakers we were just talking about. This is coming from the factory amp, and it's going to go to our LOC. I'll show you in a second how to wire it. Then these right here are all labeled. These lead back to your speakers. So out of our amplifier, with some speed wire, we're going to hook these up. First, let's cover the first step. We're going to now take each pair of these, the ones with this plug, so this is coming out of the amp. We're going to take all of those and we're going to screw them down to our terminals right here. Prepped all my wires. You see I stripped just a little bit of insulation. These actually come out. So here is ground, 12 volts in, remote out. I'm not going to worry about that yet. I'm going to pull this one out first. So there you go. So they come out like so, and then you can unscrew them. You're going to need a real tiny screwdriver, something like this. It goes channel 1, positive, then negative. So it's going to go white, then white black, gray, then gray black. Before I show it to you, there's a lot of wires that can get real confusing real fast. First thing is get all your speakers done. So I'll show you that first. So from this plug, the one that plugs into the amp, my whites, my grays, a pair of greens, a pair of purples get terminated and inserted in here. So this is front left, front right, rear left, rear right. For your subwoofer, you only have one subwoofer. You want signal out of both RCAs out here. So what you're going to do is you're going to jump it. And what that means is you're going to put 2 wires into the first hole, 2 wires into the second hole, and from those same wires you're going to go to the next 2. Basically, you're taking the signal that's coming into here and you're splitting it. You can do it this way, or you can splice the wires over here. I find this is easier, and this plugs in to the last bit of it. Then here you have ground, constant power, switch power. This is going to either our fuse tap or the wire we tapped that's going into the amp, and this blue wire is going out to your amp. That's the last one on here. It says remote out. And now this thing is fully hooked up. Our line out converter is ready to go. We're gonna go set our gains and stuff. We're gonna go by our clip light for our input, and then we're gonna plug this in and we'll get sound. Now, on the opposite side, what I'm going to do, you don't have to do this, this is just for the video purpose. I'm going to zip tie these together. These wires are now loose. This means when I go to turn on the car right now, I'm going to have no audio out of any of these speakers. So my 4-door speakers are going to have no audio. Nothing's hooked up to them. That's this right here. This leads to those speakers. Obviously, I cut them, so nothing's going to come out of them. We're still going to have sound because our center and our satellite speakers are still hooked up. So you're going to hear something, but all of my door speakers are currently disconnected. I removed more paneling so you can clearly see the wiring. So again, everything's hooked up. These right here still have to go to our amplifier, but I'm just going to test this, make sure it's turning on and off when it's supposed to. So take our key in the ignition. Now I'm going to play some pink noise. I'm going to see when these start clipping. The reason why I took the audio out of that clip is because all you're going to hear is just plain white noise. What I was doing is checking how much the output clips on that, or the input clips. So I was able to set the volume up to 38 and get, you know, pretty decent amount of volume. I haven't metered the actual RCA voltage, but our line out converter is set up. Now we need to figure out where to install it. There's very tight space there. It's going to be hard. And then we can start running our RCAs. You can see I only got a little bit of the card torn apart, but the RCAs are going to run down this side of the car. We're running 3 sets of them. They are the Rockford 20-foot dual pair cables. So quick disclaimer before you continue watching the rest of the video. There are things here that we did that are not ideal for your installation. We didn't really do anything unsafe. It's just if this was a professional installation, we would have chose to do different things. We wouldn't have crimped, we would have soldered, we would have ran the wire a little differently, protected the wire the entire way. There are a couple of things that are in this video that aren't terrible if you follow them, but this is really for illustrative purposes. So I wanted to show everything the best that I could and have it be highlighted. So one of the big mistakes, you don't want to come over your air filter, you want to go underneath. But I'm leaving that in, keeping it that way so that you can see that there is a fuse there. You need to make sure that you use a fuse there and back here. Also, both fuses need to be mounted onto something solid. You don't want to leave them on carpet. Those are examples of things we did in this install that aren't the end of the world, but should have been done better, and they're left this way to showcase that you need these items. They're crucial to your safety and the car safety, so you don't start a fire. So I ran the RCAs. They're right here. They go underneath, down this way, then down that way up to my line out converter. Now I have to run something known as speed wire or multi-conductor wire. So this is a very common mistake for the average DIYer. They go out and they buy 100 feet of speaker wire. So they'll buy just regular speaker wire like this, and then they'll run a bunch from the front to the back. The problem with that is you don't know which wire is which. It can get confusing real fast. So you simplify the install by getting speed wire or multi-conductor wire. Basically, all speed wire is a bunch of wires loomed together. So I'll show you some right here. So it looks like this, and it has a bunch of wires inside. So all those wires are in one sleeve, and they're all the same gauge, and they're color coded so that you know, okay, I have a pair of whites, I have a pair of greens, I have a pair of purples, I have a pair of grays. You know where those colors were as well on our harness. So basically when you run your speed wire, the rest of the wires are going to hook up right here, and they're going to be color coded just like the ones in the speed wire. And then when you go to put them into your amp, I'll show you where front left goes, where front right goes, etc. Put my wires in, so my signal going to my amp and my signal coming out of my amp are on this side, and they're all running right here up. I'm just going to zip tie them in place. Something you may have seen me not mention is the remote wire. So depending on what you're doing, you might want to run your own dedicated remote. But if you're using speed wire has a remote wire in it. So it's 9 conductors, meaning there's 9 wires. 8 are for your pair of speakers. 1 is a remote. So if you don't want to use the remote in there, just run your own. Also, if you're going to run a control knob or a volume knob or a bass knob, sometimes they're not long enough if you run them up that way. So I usually run them up the driver's side, because ultimately you're going to want to leave it somewhere here. So my recommendation is to run it on this side, and we'll do that later on when we run the power wire. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to get the power wire through the firewall, and then we'll run it down the left side. So I didn't get to show you on the other side, so I'll show you here. To remove this piece, you're going to undo the weather stripping. So it's going to just come right off. You're just going to pull it and stick your finger right here, and then pull towards you, and then away. It's going to be tough, but it'll come out just like that. This just has clips. So right now where the seat is isn't the best position, but I should be able to just kind of force it out. And what holds this, these 2 clips down here, and then up here, and then you see the tabs for the weather stripping. So now this is out. My other part is out, so this whole side is clear. To get this clip out, it's just force. It doesn't screw or anything. You just lift it up like that. It's gonna release. Then you can remove this all the way. And the way this goes is it has a clip right here, and then that holds it up there. So just make sure you get your clip from right here. Okay, now it's the hardest part. We have to figure out where we're gonna go through on the firewall. First thing is we want to take this down. So this has a little thing you turn. I'll show you that in a second, and then a clip. So here's what I'm talking about. This right here turns. You turn it from right here. This little thing turns. You're allowed to free this, and then we have some connectors that we need to disconnect and get out of the way. So now we have to figure out where we're going to go through a firewall. I already found the location. I'm going to try and show it to you. So right above this, I'm going to see if I can get you in there. See this line? It's highlighted with the light. That's the main boot. I'm going to show it to you on this side now. So right there, that's the main rubber boot. Right there, that's the main rubber boot. And right below that, I have cut out a space. So this is the material that was there. With a fresh box knife, I was able to cut it away, and that's where I'm gonna drill my hole. You do a lot of car audio, or you've messed around with a lot of cars, you might already have a step bit, and that's what you're gonna use to drill a new hole. They look like this. If you don't have one of these, or you don't have a drill that can drill one of these, I recommend slicing the boot very carefully and running your power wire that way. It's a lot safer. You do want to use either some sort of sealant or silicone or putty to seal it on both ends, but that'll be the easiest way. Make sure you don't slice any wires. Be very careful when you cut that boot. If you are experienced, then you can drill a hole like us. We're going to be drilling a hole just because we like to put a proper grommet on it after we drill the hole. See, there's our hole. You see there's something on the other side of it, and that's just foam padding. So on your higher end cars, there's usually a padding against the firewall. It's for noise, I think also for fire, and I'm really actually not sure what exactly the padding is for, but that padding is there. If you can reach in, you can cut away at it. If not, we just drill through it, and you're perfectly fine to drill through it too. So my power wire is right here through that hole we made. Comes right here. We're gonna have to make a fuse mount for our fuse, and then it runs down the car. This is important, so I'm gonna show you this. When you come through the firewall on this side, right, you want to go immediately left like I did. So that you can come down behind the fuse box and out of the way of anything else. And then you're just running down. We got through this side, and now our wire is right here. Just a quick recap. We ran our power wire to our distribution block. Our distribution block is fused, and then we ran a power wire to each amp. We have to do our grounds. Our grounds, there is a factory grounding point right here. It's hard to see on camera, but right there. I'm going to use that for my ground. Then I have to connect my RCAs and my speaker wire, which also has my remote wire. So I'm going to make those connections. Then I'm going to show you the final product. So here's the factory grounding point. There, we stripped away the paint, and now we're going to use, this was the factory ground. We're going to put our grounds to here as well. My power is done. RCAs are into each amp. I ran my ground. Remember, I showed you it's over here. Here are my remote wires. All that is left is my speaker wires that go right here, my speaker wire for my sub. Here are my speaker wires for the car. For the sub, I'm gonna get my own speaker wire. All right, guys, so most of our wiring is done. Our speakers are in, so driver's door, passenger door, rear left door, rear right door, and then our remote is right here. We're gonna connect our remote to this wire and this wire. So my speed wire goes from here, up and up and up to right here. Here I'm gonna strip away the sleeving and connect it to these. I'm just gonna color match them color for color. So I have a pair of whites, a pair of purples, a pair of greens. I'm gonna have the exact same colors right here. I'm just gonna color match them, and I'm gonna crimp cap them together. All right, so all of our connections are done. I'm gonna show them to you. So all of our speaker connections, we just color match green to green, white to white, etc. Then our remote is coming out of our line out converter. We're hooking up the blue wire. Our sub is not hooked up. Remember, we took the signal from the factory sub, intercepted it with our line out converter. We're not feeding a signal back because we're running our own sub. If you aren't going to run your own sub, you're going to feed signal back, it would have meant that this output from this amplifier would have went back to the sub. In our case, it's going to a dedicated subwoofer box. Nothing's getting hooked up there. You're leaving it just like that. Now I have to connect my RCAs, and then I have to tidy this up. All right, YouTube, everything's hooked up. Everything sounds great. This little sub, I know it's a little 10, a little 4 ohm, but that thing is kicking. It is pounding. My amps have power. Everything is good. Now we have to tidy up our install. So I zip tied this wire along the way. I'm gonna do the same on the other side. And then I'm going to put these covers back. I'm gonna show you once it's done, then we're gonna listen to it. We're gonna swap between the factory amp and our amp because we have that harness right there. Swapping is going to be real easy, and you can get a clear idea of how much louder this is. If you're thinking about doing this, I recommend doing it. It is very involved. You are going to have to set aside serious time, but how much louder it is, how much more bass you get, it's just, it's day and night. It's so much better. All right, guys, so we got the entire car back together. You can see this is the only piece down here that isn't together, and that's because we're going to be using it to switch between the factory amplifier and our aftermarket amplifier. This is all put together again, just the cover's missing, but all this trim on everywhere is back. It's just the same way you took it out. It's going to take a little bit of massaging, but you'll get it done. Now, we're going to listen to the system. Remember, we have JBL speakers on the left side, Audison speakers on this side. So this is gonna sound different than your car, but overall your car will be louder. So for our listening test, we're gonna close this. We're gonna leave the subwoofer right where it is. This is the slim 10-inch Kicker Comp C sub. So we're gonna close this. We're gonna put all our windows up, and then we're gonna close all our doors, obviously, and then we'll get to listening. All right, so we're starting to listen to music so you can get an idea of what it sounds like. I'm going to play 3 songs. Right now we're on our aftermarket setup, and then I'm going to play the factory setup right after. The 3 songs I'm going to do is Flashing Lights, Oye Mi Canto, and some Drake song, Headlines. So I'm going to play those 3 for you. Right now we're going to do it on the aftermarket setup that we have.
Latino right now, stand up. Credible cuts, let's go. SBK, we coming up, Gemstar, Big Nato, come What you say?
Morena, dominicano, colombiano, boricua, morena, cubano, mexicano,
You see, that's just what they want. They want reggaeton. What? They want reggaeton.
Esto es lo que quieren, toma reggaetón, toma reggaetón.
You see,
Sorry if I'm letting these go too long. I'm just getting into the songs. It just sounds good.
I might be too strung out on compliments, overdosed on confidence. Started not to give a fuck and stop fearing the consequence. Drinking every night because we drink to my accomplishments. Faded way too long, I'm floating in and out of consciousness. And they saying I'm bad, I'd agree with that. I just take my time with all this shit, I still believe in that. I had someone tell me I fell off, ooh, I needed that. And they wanna see me pick back up, well, where'd I leave it at? I know I exaggerated things, now I got it like that. Tuck my napkin in my shirt cause I'm just...
Now we're going to do one more test, the outside the car test. I don't know why, but this is something that people say all the time. Oh, I want it to be heard outside the car. So if you do this upgrade, how will it sound like outside the car with all the windows closed? I'll show that to you right now. No rattling or shaking though. We don't have that much bass in this system. But I could hear Pop Smoke's voice clear as day. So if this is how you make decisions or this is important to you, I recommend doing the upgrade if this is what you want. Okay, so now factory amp, all doors closed, everything as it is from the factory. Except for the speakers.
Latino right now, stand up. Credible cuts, let's go. SBK, we coming up. Gemstar,
Big Nato,
come What you say?
boricua, morena, dominicano, colombiano, boricua, morena, cubano, mexicano.
I might be too strung out on compliments, overdosed on confidence. Started not to give a fuck and stop fearing the consequence. Drinking every night because we drink to my accomplishments. Faded way too long, I'm floating in and out of consciousness. And they saying I'm bad, I'd agree with that. I just take my time.
Alright YouTube, there's a lot of important stuff that I didn't cover that's going to go over people's heads, so I'm going to try to summarize it right now. We didn't do any summing, any EQing, no DSPing, nothing. We took the signal that's coming out of the factory amplifier and we made it louder. The factory amplifier is still responsible for the crossovers, the EQ curve, any time delay. We just made everything louder. Now this is perfect if you want to be louder. If you want better sound, you're going to need something that can sum or create delay or DEQ or remove delay and filters from your speakers. Something like that. I showed you the Audison. We actually never ended up hooking it up just because of time constraints. The Link 6 does have some summing for the subwoofer, the signal of other stuff. I'm not sure how internally it sums. You could read the documentation. But know that we aren't responsible for any crossover points because the factory amplifier is taking care of that. So when I went to tune my amps, I only set my gains. I left my crossover points as full on my voice amp, and then on my subwoofer amp, I just left it where it comes from the factory because the crossover is going to be set by the factory amplifier. You're going to be able to make it higher but not lower unless you do some signal manipulation yourself. When it comes to setting the gains and things like that, you are going to have to figure that out on your own. It's really as simple as turn it up till it starts to sound bad, but it's not a volume control, and that's a very rudimentary way. There are special tools to set it. It's going to depend on your exact application, the kind of music you listen to, where you plan to listen to that music, at what volume, etc., with what settings. So there's a lot there. Ultimately, my recommendation, put the rate up to 35, start turning the gain until you think it sounds bad. When it sounds bad, back it off just a little bit, and that should be enough to get you by. There are professional tools if you want to go to a professional shop that can help you tune your system or set your gains, so you can do everything yourself and then see if they're willing to help you with that. Also, there's a lot of talking in the beginning of this video that covers a lot of the parts used and how our MDX is set up. I was going to put it in the beginning, but I'm putting it in the end, which is probably going to follow this. You're going to want to watch that if you have a lot of technical questions or wondering how we got to this point. This video, all right, if you're watching it, you probably saw it started right away with us doing something. You're like, whoa, it doesn't normally start like that. It's just because that's kind of the stuff everyone wants to see when it comes to these installations. All the talking and stuff, they don't really want to think about it or know about it, but it is important. So I am putting it in the video. I am including it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave it down in the comment. So another quick side note, if you are in the planning phase of your build, feel free to reach out to us in the comments so we can help you select the best equipment and come up with a plan for your install. Because it's going to depend whether if you want to, you know, maybe just be really loud or just have a lot of bass or have the system sound really good. Maybe you want your sound stage to be real particular. You want it to be right on the dash or right at your ears, etc. It's all going to matter. It's all going to be different. So while this is general and it'll get the car louder, we'll get bass, you might have a specific goal in mind. And while this video will help you achieve that goal, if you have some trouble selecting which amps or DSPs, etc. to use, feel free to put it down in the comments. We'll try to help you. I almost forgot. If this is the first video you're ever watching on the channel, welcome to the Acura Audio Garage. This video is part of the DIY Pro series. There are other videos in this series that cover all the other audio upgrades for this car. So we're up to the amplifiers. We already done the speaker. We already did the subwoofer. We already did some radio videos. So you might want to check those out before jumping into this so you can make the best decision possible. The reason why I'm bringing all this up is because we have aftermarket speakers installed already. So we have Audison speakers on this side of the car, and we have JBL speakers on the opposite side of the car. So ours final result, even if you follow this step by step, is going to sound different from yours because we have aftermarket speakers. If you're going to do this with the factory speakers, they can handle a little bit more power. So from the factory about 20 watts, bring them up to 50 watts, usually with no problem. But know that your amplifier needs to be 2 ohms stable. So you see at 2 ohms it says 4 by 200 watts. If it said NA like it does here, that means this amp would not work with 2 ohm speakers. So beware of that, because all the factory speakers are 2 ohms except for the center and the satellites. So if you try to amplify them with the wrong amplifier, you're going to fry your amplifier and you're not going to have a good time. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that before someone attempted to do this and then at the end had the worst result where their amplifier fries and now they have no volume at all. So just beware. If you're going to do this, I recommend aftermarket speakers. If you're going to do it on the factory speakers, make sure your amplifier can handle it. So it looks like I have plenty of room for my amps. You can see Hiphonics there, kicker here. I do still need to figure out where I'm going to run my wire, and because I'm doing 2 amps, I want to use fused power distribution, which just means a fuse to protect each amp. So this goes right where the amps are. This goes underneath our hood. So we need to make sure that we have enough space for that, and also for our wires. So it may make more sense to flip this way so that all our wires come out this way and go that way. we'll see as we continue with the installation which way is going to be the best way. Now that we know our amps are going to fit, let's cover where we need to install our other stuff. So that's going to be our amp kit. So our amp kit's what's going to give us power and ground. This is all our power wire right here. There are no signal or RCA wires here, so we need to make sure we keep that in mind. But here we have fuse distribution for the back. We have a fuse for the front. We have enough power wire. We're most likely going to run our power wire up this left side and run our speaker and signal up the right side. So I have the most flexibility. I'm going to use 20-foot RCAs, and I am going to run them up this side. These RCAs are going to hook up to our DSP or line out converter. Our factory radio doesn't have RCA outputs, so we need either a line out converter or a DSP to convert our signal to a low level signal that RCAs can carry and bring to our amplifiers. And then the last thing we need is to bring the amplified speaker signal from our amplifiers back to our speakers. So we're gonna not run speaker wire to each and individual speaker. It's gonna take way too long. We're gonna run multi-conductor speed wire up this side as well and connect it to where our factory amplifier is. Since the harness that I showed you earlier has two sides, one hooks into the factory amplifier just like this, and the other back to the car. So the side that hooks back to the car will give us access to all the speakers from one central location. And because this harness is connected fully, I can cut just the speakers I want to amplify. Like I said before, we are going to only amplify the front left door, the front right door, the rear left door, rear right door, and our subwoofer. The center channel and the two satellite speakers will not be amplified. They will stay on the factory amplifier because our factory amplifier will stay completely in place. We cannot completely bypass it or disconnect it in our installation. Otherwise, we will lose volume control because the factory amplifier and the factory radio talk to each other on a CAN bus. So we talked about the power wire, the signal wire. We talked about that multi-conductor speed wire. Here's 150 feet of it. I'm sorry, 250 feet. That's 18 gauge wire, which will be more than perfect for our application. If you're running over 200 watts to each door, you're gonna wanna run new speaker wire into each door. It is a pain in the ass to do so. You have to either drill the door or drill the connector that goes into the door. It's real annoying. So if you really wanna build a loud system, I recommend maybe a custom box enclosure or something, because trying to amplify your door with that much power running new power wire is super annoying. I don't recommend it. Just stay either at 100, 125 watts, use all the factory wiring, and maybe you bring this from 18 gauge to 16 gauge or 14 gauge, but anything other than that, it's gonna be overkill. On your MDX TSX TL, your front door speaker and your tweeter are on the same channel. Your factory tweeter is protected by a bass blocker. If you get speakers from us, either the Audison, the JBL, the Infinity, they all are going to have bass blockers for the tweeter as well. Those are good up to 60 watts. The Audison are good up to 100 watts. So just be aware of that when you go to install your amplifier, because you could easily blow up those tweeters.